live.
Yeah.
Band leader of Marabele. He's not just about music, he's a storyteller, playwright, and director. His plays have graced stages like Wits Theatre and Market Theatre. Magogodi's fellowships span from New York University to the African Freedom Station. At Wits School Arts, he nurtures future playwrights and directors. He's also building GaMmatsello, an open theatre in Mahikeng. Magogodi's passion? Empowering youth with Afrocentric knowledge. Join his journey and witness the magic of performance art.
Kembo Kembo Tatananzambi Tungu Yamazulu. Depending on where you are, I greet you. Dayo Dayo Nusiemi Betwa Bumbote Molweni Abantuana Abangoni Mpo Salama Watoto wa Mungu. Yes, depending on where you are, I greet you. And today we have with us none other than the one, the only, Dr.Kgafela wa Magogodi.
Eta dumelang. Just to fix the tail, you got the head. Kgafela wa Magogodi. But yeah, I'm here. Happy to be
here. You had that. It's very important.
You said it well. You said it well.
Not to disrespect a man's name. That is his ancestry. Those are his ancestors. So in honoring a man's name, you honor his ancestors. Doctor is no stranger to us. He's a playwright. He's a director. He's a fellow. And he directs the spoken word. And more importantly, he is centered on Africa or Afrocentric teachings. My elder, speak to us.
Eta. Yeah, I'm here, happy to be invited to your platform and to speak about everything African and revolutionary. Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. So I'm here, let's talk and do the work.
Thank you, thank you. A man with a vision, but with few words. So, some may call you controversial, but I just say you're a visionary. You know, one of the plays you have directed, the book of Rebellations, doesn't that spark fire in those that are still believe what was brought to them?
Yeah, look, I mean, the book of Rebellations is a play that I wrote some years ago, Ecole wrote rather, with Mahikeng Motsabi, another fantastic playwright and director who I think has a lot of fire in him. So we connected a few years ago because we were thinking about the nature of the neo-colonial settlement and how it seems to dislocate the indigenous people, you know, and there's pictures everywhere in Africa is the same. I mean, you there from Kenya, you would know about the work of Ngugi wa Thiong'o, whom we are celebrating this week because he's transitioned, right? So the same kind of situation that Ngugi perhaps speaks to in whether the trial of Dedan Gemati, whether I'll marry when I want, a few years ago with another fantastic director, Prince Lamla, we directed, we adapted Devil on the Cross, so by Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Of course, we are looking at the nature of the neo-colonial settlement from the perspective of those who are really disenfranchised, or those who have been denied the fruits of Uhuru, as it were, because when we look around, the geography of poverty is still very much black, and the geography of wealth in this country is still very much white. So there is a lot that has not been done. The land, much of it, if around 80% or so, if not, more or less, is still in the hands of the very white people who claim to be under siege and running all over the show, making all sorts of dramatic situations in the US, claiming to be victims of genocide and all. But look, I mean, the fact is that Book of Rebellations, Hohoa, comes to clean up a corrupt situation, where the ruling elite, are basically eating up Africa and its children.
And this is the third tale across everywhere. We have seen the role of the arts in most revolutions, like using South Africa as a good example. We had students singing and chanting. We even have a certain chant that has become very popular in the recent days because of the same thing that you mentioned, that nonsense that is being spread there. So now, why is it that a lot of our youth are running away from what is ours when it comes to the arts? We want to ape something they have seen somewhere else.
Yeah, I think it's a very coloniality that still that we are speaking about, that still lingers. It's ugly head, and it has gone very much within. The symmetry is inside, as some people would say. It's a symmetry within. So we still have to discard this stuff, because the white unconscious prevails very much in society, such that when you speak anything Afrocentric, you still have to introduce it. Afrocentricity is a stranger in Africa. So that's why at the beginning of my of this interview, I said there's a lot of work to be done, because the mind is still very much in chains. So there's a need to dismantle those chains to make people understand that there's a lot that is in the DNA that is power. And the power is there in our mystery systems. If you look back at the morning of time, as someone said, early periods, whether a friend of mine, for instance, called Moteo Koitsiwe, will be publishing a book about the Bakhatla astronomy, Bulepadinaledi, you see. So these are my people in the sense that I come from the Dr.Kgafela. But as a general score, I mean, when you look at this knowledge, whenever people speak about Africa in the past, it's through when we wear lenses of the West, right? Africa becomes this barbaric space. It's like when we think about African past, it's like we are plunging into darkness. But that is so incorrect if you understand what's in your DNA, if you have looked at your history thoroughly. So as a playwright, I find myself studying the mystery systems because these are the things that inform later what becomes our aesthetics, the way we create our theater. So I was able to glean into something very fantastic, and this is why it was easy to understand Dr. Kgafela's work, besides the fact that I come from the Dr.Kgafela. The context for me was that when you look back and you study people like Sheikh Anta Diop, Credo Mutwa, they give you a map of these mystery systems and how you should, in some ways, the same map provides you the story of the beginnings of humanity. So you'll realize that the light begins in Africa. The first mother ever is a black woman, because there had been a whole history of humanity that begins here, whether Sheikh Anta Diop arguably puts us in the Great Lakes, and then when you read Indaba My Children, it takes us further south into the Chilahaebolae region. So all these things are where the light began, and we wish that this knowledge could be transferred, but we are here to do the work, and we shouldn't be lazy to do the work, to find ourselves with in situations like this. That's why I'm grateful for people like you who are able to set up these conversations and broadcast them as widely as possible, in spite of the kind of challenges that we face as people who speak the kind of language that sits outside official containers, because this history is also not just a history that seeks to be understood as a history of people who who have nothing to offer the world. We have so much to give the world. That's why I'm giving an example of the system of astronomy, because we often talk about the dogons. We often talk about Kemet as well, which is where, especially when you look at the scholars from the global north, whether African or not, there's a sense in which they've not really looked at what is happening in Southern Africa. So this is where we are coming from, my brother, trying to really switch on the light, and we hope that the kids that are coming after us will catch that light, because this is what will raise their vibrations, so that they understand that they actually are the ones who are educating the world. It's not the other way.
Bayete. Thank you for bringing up those key points, and I will have Nkosi Yami, that what the Dogon call Sigitolo down in East Africa, my people know it as Njadi. So when you talk of astronomy, the astronomy of our forefathers, when you talk of the Abtu, when you talk of Embo being the cradle, when you talk of the ancient gods, when you talk of the ancient Sumerian connection with Africa, when this is the cradle of man, and this is a story we have across Abantwana, Abanguni, those of Ntu, the cosmic force of creation. Those who know of Mukutulwane, those who know of Ilanga, those who know of, I'm sure these are things you would want to take us through. But then again, you find, and to bring you to this, which is very important, how do we convince this young generation? Because they have been taught, because somebody came and did not understand which craft is this that our people are using, so they branded it witchcraft. So how do we convince this young generation? Because what Umbaba Credo Mutwa, Mkulu Credo Mutwa taught, what most of these Sanusis of what they are not, and these keepers of ancient wisdom, the griots in Mali, the the Khoisan, the Zulu, the Xhosa, they all have this unique contribution. How do we convince this young generation to tap into this?
Look, let's not also paint the young in one brush. Of course, there are those who are chasing a different path, you know, from you and me, but we do have quite, for me, at least in my knowledge, to my knowledge, or at least in my experience, I do meet young people who are interested and who are thirsting for this knowledge. So I'm not necessarily despairing. I know that, you know, in spaces where I thrive, for instance, we have to be deliberate in how we do these things. You know, the manner in which these things penetrated us, this coloniality, it penetrated us through institutions, right? So we create our own institutions. And as Ngugi teaches us in decolonizing the mind, institutions are not just buildings, you know, they are us everywhere we go. You know, I can be having conversations with these young people who are searching, and you know, each one teach one, and that's how it moves, you know. So there are those, of course, that we'll have to convince, but there are those who are convinced. It's just a question of how do we deepen the knowledge. An example that I would like to give, really, in South Africa, there is an institution called Blackhouse Collective. The Blackhouse Collective, now, I'm an associate of that. But the most important thing is the leadership here is by Zandi Khadebe and her crew, right? What they do is they take young people through a program of Afrocentric knowledge. They will have another one this week, or rather this June. Every year, it's young people. I've interacted with that space, you know, and I've seen young people grow from childhood, just being introduced to this knowledge that is African and also combative, because it's not enough just to look back, but how to use these tools of knowledge to combat, you know, the current situation of dispossession. And this is where the Blackhouse Collective comes in. So we can't be hopeful, you know, if we are not creating programs. You know, I work at Wits, of course, and that in that situation, one explores, you know, the cracks in the edifice of a system that was not created by us. You know, I'm a scholar there, of course, but there's a lot of things that have to shift, that we as Afrocentric scholars have to deal with, because the truth is that even as you work in that institution, you are aware of yourself always having to battle, you know, always having to deal with red tape and all sorts of things, because these institutions were not created by us. But you know, and of course, it doesn't mean that you are shunning the opportunity to be in a space that allows you to grow as a scholar. You know, that those are different things. But as a scholar, of course, you have to have the critical faculty to understand exactly what time it is and where you are. So you are not blind to the fact that you are still dealing with a predominantly Babylonian situation. So that you are fighting, you are part of it, but you have to fight, you know, a coloniality in that space. So we have students. I was watching their plays very recently, and then as I'm watching, I thought of a phrase that was made by Eskiam Pahlele in 1967, when he was observing Black consciousness as it was emerging at the time. And he said, we are entering a new phase of Black consciousness. And this is what I'm trying to look at now, trying to say now. We should not despair. We are entering a new phase of Black consciousness. There are these efforts by students that I'm seeing. I mean, I watched 3 plays or 4 plays. There's not even a single word of English in those plays, you know. And these are students at Wits University, 4th-year students directing. And I thought this is very powerful, because when I entered that university for the first time as a student, even later on as a lecturer, it was clear to me that the education that was in our university was designed for the white kid. That's why a lot of these kids call themselves thespians and all sorts of things, because there's a belief that Thespis is the first actor, which is obviously not true, because we gave the Greeks, the mystery systems that created the thespians. So people are completely lost here. Every day you hear thespian, thespian, thespian. Oh, so and so is a great thespian. These are black people. So it shows you a lot of decoloniality, of coloniality. And I'm not saying they're not young people, these people. So let's not also think it's the young people. They're people of my age, man. We are completely lost. A friend of mine and an elderly Fifi Tladi says something very interesting. Says, look, a young fool will be an old fool, right? So discarding the idea that the older you become, you accumulate wisdom. Yeah, so our project is not just with the youth, man. The elders are also a problem. At least this is my experience in this country, and I'm using the word problem guardedly. But that's the point, is that we have a lot of work to do, not just to speak to the youth, but also, we have to accept that a lot of the people whom we think should know better are actually also still very much in the dark. They've not the light that is Africa has not reached them, so you can see it even in our own country. We have people whom we think are educated. Let's take the president of my own country and the deputy president. At the same time as Traore is being haunted by, Western powers hiding and all. These guys, my deputy president is in, and I'm saying my because I have no other words. Is in France, trying to explain to the French that we are good people, and that Traore's mission begins with discarding French coloniality in the now, or it's the ghost of that, and then same time at the same week that my president, and again is a compromise, is in the US trying to explain to Trump things that don't exist. So we are becoming this good boys and good or good girls or whatever. We're trying to show the West that no, we are fine, and this is a betrayal, my brother. So you can see this is just an indication of how the rest of Africa is operating. The one brother is trying to fight strongly. The others are just trying to find favors. And the struggle, this type of person is not new, man. It begins long ago. If you remember Iguayama as 2000 Seasons, where he talks about is it 2000? No, I think it's in The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born. The main character there called Womsen, or rather the man, meets a minister of plenipotentiary, and as they shake hands, right? And he observes how soft these hands are, the minister's hands are. And he says, these are the socialists of Africa, soft, perfumed, soft with the ancestral softness of chiefs who sold their people and are celestially happy with the fruit of their trade. So the betrayal begins long ago with those chiefs who, were taking advantage as white people who entered were looking for cracks in the edifice of African society. So so there's a lot of work to be done, my brother, and this is why we are here, and this is why people like Ngugi were here, and their spirits continue to be celebrated.
Thank you. As humble as he is full of wisdom, And you know, my brother, I cannot do you justice if I do not ask you about Marabele. I love music. Music is the rhythm. Even if we talk about the stars, music allows you to dream beyond the stars. So, how did you come up with that? Let's go to the history. I know you've done this conversation many times, but always think of it as a new experience. How did that come about, please?
Yeah, I think it is also quite dangerous to assume that I've done this conversation many times because I get censored in my country, so I do it rarely. So let's consider this a rare treat. There are very few people like you in my country who want to listen to. And I'm saying journalists. Basically we are talking about people who are not really understanding what's going on in the continent, and they are simply working for capital and the interest of the elite. And you'll find that the character of a radio station is basically a government mouthpiece or a mouthpiece for capital. That's the general idea. So you can't really have the kind of conversations that me and you are having now. Thankfully, we have social media. All the people like you with these platforms allow us to breathe. We no longer have to beg them, right? Back in the day, you had to ask some idiot for an interview, and then they have all this red tape, and they would mystify this idea of being on TV and on radio. We are skipping that now. That is all in the past, so we can speak freely, and we can speak also not just in our countries but in the world. Because in this country, my brother, I can tell you, man, the red tape is too thick. And I'm saying red tape because, that's the word that's coming now. But censorship, we must sink the censorship. And Marabele was created precisely to sink the censorship, right? So I started with a brother called Tebogo. He's a maker of indigenous instruments. And so I was in Mahikeng at the time. I was working for the University of the Northwest. So I thought a lot of my time I could spend it also just exploring rhythm and its possibilities. So that was the beginning of Marabele. Later on, I had a lot of people that played in that band. Key person now would be Tulani Shabangu, who's also the guy who our sound engineer, and he owns the studio where we record our music. So it's all in Soweto, Orlando. So as I've said, that we're not working in the mainstream. We've got our own equipment. We do things without them. And that's important. We do things for ourselves. They can close their gates, lock their doors. You know what the gatekeepers are. They can stay there while we move around, my brother. We don't have time for that nonsense. So Marabele does that. We move around outside any kind of festival, because these festivals also don't want us. That's why I'm saying this conversation is rare. The festivals are basically, for me at least, this is my experience. They are there for people who have nothing to say. They're for entertainers, whether you call them jazz festivals, whatever. It's very rare that you'd find that a band like Marabele will play. But we are not worried about these things. We create our own platforms. This country is ours. It doesn't belong to any politician. It doesn't belong to any elite person in this. It is ours. We can, occupy any space. For instance, one of the things that I'm doing now with my team is we have what we call the Ndofire Street Jam. So we allow all sorts of voices that come because to express themselves, because then there's no artistic director, there's no such thing. You know, people come and the microphone is there. So Marabele exists in such places. You know, Marabele is a band that, you know, also plays around the country. Very recent, last week we were playing in was it in Rustenburg, the other day, you know. So we are not necessarily for spaces that are contained, like for instance, at the beginning of your intro, the stuff about the market theater and so forth and so forth. These are things that perhaps somewhere in the past, you know, one has had the fortune or the misfortune, I don't know, to have opened that crack and maybe had a play or two, but those spaces don't want us. These are spaces that are controlled by government. You know, we'll remember that the market theater, the state theater, and all other theaters that are sponsored by government, whether Mabana in the Northwest, are controlled. These are basically getting sponsors from the Department of Arts and Culture, and they have something called a 10-point plan, around which, you know, they create or they curate work. So people like us who make plays that don't fit in those spaces have been discarded. So there's a movement now to start our own things outside these official containers. We don't really need them, because Ngugi said it, man. Theater is not a building. Wherever we are, we plug, we play, you know. So this is what Marabele is about, plugging and playing everywhere, the freedom to speak as freely as you want, because why would we be wanting to be controlled by politicians, whether like we operate outside political parties also, because it's important to understand that these things divide us. You know, you are wearing red, I'm wearing green, you are wearing yellow, and then that becomes a source of division. You know, these political parties, are really, really problematic in that sense. They're part of the problem, because they only really serve the elite. They are like little factories. Every politician who wants to eat and eat well opens a political party, and of course it's easy to wear the garb of revolution. Some of them even have uniforms that pretend revolution, but you know, I'm a theater maker. I can see through uniform. And
Thank
masks.
you. Indeed. And talking of mass, do you think it's a little too soon to ask about Metsi-Dololo? Did I get that right?
No, it's not. So Metsi Dololo is dropping this Saturday, right, on all platforms. We had it for the past few months on the Bandcamp platform, and it's been doing well. I think people are taking the liking to it. But what's important here, there are two things about Metsi Dololo, right? The first thing is the message. Of course, we live in an environment where what has been commodified more and more, right? So the scarcity now is screaming louder, and that's the beginning. But the song itself draws on what I used to use as a nursery rhyme when I was a child, but it's an incantation really. But I'm not sure if these English words can equate to explaining what this piece is. But I grew up reciting Naledi ele yamariberi beri bela kapele ronwa metsi ga ayo anuleke khaupe. So I create the piece around this, because I'm interested in the character of Khaupe, because I've never really known. I've always wondered, who is Khaupe? And when I started imagining Khaupe, I began to see, you know, this monstrous greed that is eating us. And by that, I'm saying it's something that is within us, you know. So Khaupe drinks all the water and there's nothing. You know, that is where the beginning of this thing. But then it doesn't end there. It ends with a sense of change at the end, because Naledi Amariberibe, is coming to rebel and change the situation. So there's two parts to the song, but when you listen, we just having going, basically, it's also the second thing that I wanted to highlight is that I worked with students. I didn't work with my band at this time. I was deliberate because I'm interested also in young talent, and so then I thought it would be best to see how to work with young people produces something completely fresh. So Thabiso Motau becomes a sound engineer, the pianist as well. So I play a bit of percussion there, and there's so many others. The list is there, but I spend a lot of the time in the studio with the Thabiso Motau. The Rato Sekele is not a young person anymore. She's a student of mine back in the day when I was starting to teach, one of my guinea pigs. But the most important thing is that she's now a mother and a theater producer. So she works at Wits as well. So I said, come in, because I've worked with her in the past. You asked me about Book of Rebellations. She was studying in Book of Rebellations back in the day. So I then brought her in because I remembered she had such a golden voice, and I thought, let's see, she's around, So there's so many. I thought I should give opportunities to just to see how a new sound will come out. So because I'm passionate about really bringing along young people. We shouldn't leave them behind when we create revolutions, when we make combat through sound, because that's one way of making sure that they stay with us. So Metsi Dololo represents those two things, working with the youth, but also a conversation with the present, a critical dialogue with the greed that is within us, that we must perish.
Thank you, Nkosiyami. As you have heard, Metsi Dololo is dropping by Marabele. It's music. You only have to hear it to understand it, and to understand it, you feel it. It's not something you can describe in one word. It's an experience. It's something you have to feel. It's a vibration. For those that know exactly what I'm saying. And I know the good doctor just got home and he has been giving us his time. We have been bullying him around, and he was kind enough. He was kind enough to allow us that time. So before we let you do your 1-2, perhaps a parting shot, a word for the awakening mind, a word for the mind that slumbers, and a word for the mind that knows it should awake but chooses to slumber. In your words, Doctor.
Yeah, I'm trying to find words. They're not coming easy, so I will be gentle with myself. And as I'm thinking through your question, what comes up is I remember Mutabaruka's line from a long time ago. Mutabaruka, the Jamaican poet, who said that from our foot them take the chain, now them put it on we brain, So they take the chain from the foot. The chain is removed from the foot, from the body, as it were, and now it's on the brain. And this is the work that we need to do, the work of the psyche. Pico writes well about, pumping life into that empty shell. That's why we make vibrations. That's why we write plays. We are in the process of pumping life into that empty shell. So we are all trying to awaken ourselves, to this reality, also to open cast open the future, and we must walk together, because no one can really do this thing alone, you see. So and as we enter into this phase of combat, because I think for me, Africa is awake. Let's not also despair, because I've spoken about institutions like Blackhouse Collectives. Marabele is an institution that is mobile, you know. So all these things are important. So let's form our own institutions. Let's work outside official containers, because we can work freely there, and then bring back the continent, because the fight is still on. Let's not sleep on that point.
Thank you. Enkosi yami. Enkosi mkulu, for the time, for the patience. Even though we were bullied, you did not despair.
Yeah, it was quite a dramatic beginning to the interview. We had visuals, and then suddenly your power cut, and my visuals were gone. We know how they operate. But yeah, the voice came through. They can take away the image. All we need is the voice.
And the good thing, we have been given 2 of these. So if you've heard from the good doctor, take this wisdom, take these words of divine, think about them, contemplate on that, because we say on Bantu Re-Education TV, we are here to lead the mind to the place it was conditioned not to go. And we only do this by rightly dividing the word of truth. And when Dr.Kgafela or Magogodi,
Magogodi, let me assist you quickly. I know that the God in my name is tempting to say, but I'm no God, so let's go back to Magogodi.
Has given us the pleasure of sharing his ancestral wisdom here on Bantu Re-Education TV. We remind you, FESTAC 2025 is happening in Accra, Ghana, where Africa will be experiencing itself in 7 days. It's a meeting of culture, arts, fashion, music, dance, anything that is African, you will find it there. Carry your business cards, carry your mind to network with your fellow Africans in this opportunity. So we thank the good doctor for his time. We thank him for his wisdom. And until next time, we say, Bayete, Dayo Dayo.
Amandla.
Yeah, Amandla. Forward to the people. This is not the last you will see of the good doctor, because as always, Sazobuya, we always return.
Sir.
Meet Dr.Kgafela or Magogodi, the dynamic band leader of Marabele. He's not just about music, he's a storyteller, playwright, and director. His plays have graced stages like Wits Theatre and Market Theatre. Magogodi's fellowships span from New York University to the African Freedom Station. At Wits School Arts, he nurtures future playwrights and directors. He's also building GaMmatsello, an open theatre in Mahikeng. Magogodi's passion? Empowering youth with Afrocentric knowledge. Join his journey and witness the magic of performance.